He has no sympathy for the staff at Charlie Hebdo? No shot.
Which were fanatically anti...
What?
Please shut up. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother was in my concentration camp. Every single member...
She's like losing her mind. Bro, chill. What are you doing? Norman Finkelstein's thing. John Brown's body in Gaza. Dolores Ibru La Passionaria famously exhorted during the Spanish Civil War, better to die on your feet than live forever on your knees. For the past 20 years, the people of Gaza, half of whom are children, have been immured in a concentration camp. Today, they breached the camp's walls. If we honor John Brown's armed resistance to slavery, if we honor the Jews who revolted in the Warsaw Ghetto, then moral consistency commands that we honor the heroic resistance in Gaza. I, for one, will never begrudge. On the contrary, it warms every fiber of my soul. The scenes of Gaza's smiling children as their arrogant Jewish supremacist oppressors have finally been humbled. Holy shit. I think Erin said she was going to try to reach out to get me a debate with this guy, so maybe we'll chat with Finkelstein. Jesus Christ. Wait, somebody said to look up what he said about Charlie Hebdo? No shot, right? Hold on. There's no shot. Norman Finkelstein, Charlie Hebdo. Charlie Hebdo is sadism, not satire. He has no sympathy for the staff at Charlie Hebdo? No shot. Let's say, amidst all of this death and destruction, two young Jews barged into the headquarters of the editorial offices of Der Stürmer, and they killed the staff for having humiliated them, degraded them, demeaned them, and insulted them, queried Norman Finkelstein, right? A professor of political science and author of numerous books, including The Holocaust Industry and Method and Madness. How would I react to that, said Finkelstein, who is a son of Holocaust survivors. The desperate and despised people of today are Muslims, he said, considering the number of Muslim countries racked by death and destruction in the cases of Syria, Iraq, Gaza, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Yemen. So two despairing and desperate young men act out their despair and desperation against this political pornography, no different than Der Stürmer, who, in the midst of all this death and destruction, decided somehow noble to degrade, demean, humiliate, and insult the people. I'm sorry, maybe it is very politically incorrect. I have no sympathy for the staff of Charlie Hebdo. Should they have been killed? Of course not. But of course, Stryker shouldn't have been hung. I don't hear that from many people. Stryker was among those who stood trial on charges at Nuremberg. Following World War II, he was hung for those cartoons. Finkelstein said some might argue that they have a right to mock even desperate. What is, what was the Charlie Hebdo? Was it just a picture of Muhammad, or did they have more? I can't spell this shit. Was it like some wild and crazy shit? I don't remember exactly what in September 2012, wait. It was in response for this, right? 2012? This is what the attack was in response to, right? The newspaper published a series of satirical cartoons of Muhammad. One cartoon depicted Muhammad as a nude man on all fours with a star covering his anus. Another shows Muhammad bending over naked and begging to be admired. Given that this issue came days after a series of attacks on U.S. embassies in the Middle East, purportedly in response to the anti-Islamic film Innocence of Muslims, the French government decided to increase security at certain French embassies. On January 7th, 2015, two Islamist gunmen forced their way into the Paris headquarters of Charlie Hebdo and opened fire, killing 12. Jesus. Wait, can I hear like a full clip of him talking about this? Maybe like in the context of like another conversation. It doesn't sound quite as unhinged? Ugh, this Democracy Now! Channel. This is like a far left YouTube channel, right?
What most struck me about the report was it was remarkably honest.
Defending the Hebdo attackers tells me all I need to know about this person. Thanks, Lawson.
It was very forthright in its conclusions. and it didn't fake this kind of balance, which most human rights organizations, even reputable ones, attempt between Israel and the United States. So just to take a couple of examples, it forthrightly stated that Israel targets intentionally children during these demonstrations. It targets reporters, it targets medical personnel. That's unusual.
Hassan loves this channel. Yeah, this channel is like super dog shit far left. Democracy Now! Is like that.
Allow me just two examples which you would be familiar with. So when there was the killings during Operation Protective Edge of the 4 children who were playing hide and seek.
This was back in 2014.
In 2014. Recently, The Intercept had an article on those 4 killings of the 4 kids, and had the story that they weren't really intentionally killed. It was an accident. It was a mistake. And same thing with the New York Times when they had the big story on Razan El-Najjar, which was quoted everywhere. The essence of the story was there was a Israeli sniper's bullet. It hit the ground, ricocheted, and then accidentally hit 3 Israeli medical personnel. It was a magic bullet because there was a huge crowd of people. But this magic bullet only hit 3 medical personnel. But this human rights report by the Human Rights Council, it's very straightforward. It says intentionally targets children, intentionally targets even disabled persons, and that to me was a credit to them, that there was no fake balance. If you look at the proportions, when it looks at the damages done to the people of Gaza, they devote 10 full pages. And then there's a section called Impact on Israel. It's 3 paragraphs. And that's exactly what the reality shows, that overwhelmingly, in fact, virtually entirely, all the infliction of death and destruction is on the Palestinian side. There were, for the period they covered, during the demonstrations, there were no fatalities during the demonstrations, and 4 Israeli soldiers were lightly injured.
Apparently, Norman Finkelstein retweets Hassan videos. Holy shit, no shot, dude. Recent reaction from Hassan the Hun to a recent appearance. My God. The failings of Finkelstein. Norman Finkelstein has always been a loose cannon. His sometimes insightful political and historical analysis is invariably undermined by a contrarian urge to shock and provoke. Well, I can appreciate that. When it comes to opposing Zionism and defending Palestinian rights, or repelling false and exaggerated accusations of anti-Semitism on the left, Norman's support is often more of a hindrance than a help. His performance last week in an online meeting hosted by Labor Against the Witch Hunt, the purpose of which was to defend free speech in the face of a campaign to silence the left with false accusations of anti-Jewish racism, was a case in point. His comments proved highly controversial, as he no doubt intended, and resulted in a denunciatory article from Lee Harpin in the Jewish Chronicle titled, Norman Finkelstein praises Holocaust denier David Irving at pro-Corbyn group meeting. What is this?
We had
2 hours, bro.
Over 600 people register, which is quite something.
Yeah.
The record for our account for sure. We've got almost 260 in the audience at the moment.
On the Isle of Dogs in London's East End, opposing the fascist British National Party when they got their first councillor elected. And on the picket line outside the Sunday Times, after it had published Hitler apologist David Irving's version of Goebbels' diaries. On both occasions, side by side with Jewish comrades. In fact, Ali G., Sacha Baron Cohen, as a young Jewish activist, was one of them. Eminent Jewish lawyer Jeffrey Byman drafted a racial Ivan Lauren. That actually wasn't just it's called Shepherd to these read
Jesus Christ, bro, wrap it up.
None of what he said, she says, is by itself. None of the things are a problem, but you add them all up. Why they should not be expelled.
Conducting for some time now a concerted effort.
Embrace. I would also say that goes for using terms like anti-Semitism and anti-Semites. So Tony Greenstein, I agree with him actually quite a lot. But when he says things like, well, if you call Jews killers of Christ, you're an anti-Semite. If you engage in Holocaust denial, you're an anti-Semite. I think Mr. Wadsworth said, if I understood him correctly, and I might be wrong here, but he opposed the publication of David Irving's Diaries of Goebbels because Irving.
I'm new to your channel after binging a ton of your videos. You've helped me see the leftists and people like Hassan. I won't get rid of my DW subscription, but we'll definitely take a closer look before I believe the stuff they say. Well, thanks, buddy.
Is a Hitler apologist. I think all of that, the labels like anti-Semite, I don't know if Jews killed Christ or not. Frankly, I don't really care all that much. It doesn't keep me up late at night or exercise me when I get up in the morning.
I can't hear this.
But those are sorts of things which should just be debated, disputed, and you come out with your own conclusions. Did the Jews do it or did they not? When Mel Gibson made his film Passion of the Christ, he seemed to have started off by blaming Jewish moneylenders or the Jews in the temple for Christ's killing, and then he was forced to change the script. I don't see why anyone should be forced to change anything. Express.
Finkelstein's contribution to the meeting started well enough. It was the Zionist lobby who had taken the initiative in whipping up hysteria over labor anti-Semitism. Oh, he links to the Times.
Our final speaker, before we try to open.
Oh, I think this is closer. Okay. He argued, but the campaign had not been only or even primarily about Israel. It made the impact it did because it was taken up by wider reactionary forces intent on blocking the formation of a Corbyn-led Labour government that would pose a general threat to the political status quo. Finkelstein made the point very effectively, and it was a helpful corrective to the Zionist conspiracy school of thought that sees the Labour anti-Semitism witch hunt as being directed from Tel Aviv. Unfortunately, it all went downhill from there. Finkelstein questioned whether it's anti-Semitic to describe Jews as killers of Christ, even though this has been an accusation favored by anti-Semites for centuries, having inspired pogroms back in the Middle Ages. The issue of the number of victims who died in the Holocaust should be open to statistical, scholarly questions, he opined, despite this being the specious argument used by every Holocaust revisionist. Worst of all, Finkelstein saw fit to mount a defense of David Irving, the Hitler-admiring, Nazi-sympathizing writer who achieved international prominence 20 years ago over his libel case against David Irving was a very good historian, Finkelstein declared. I don't care what Richard Evans says. He was a very good historian. He produced works which are substantive. He knew a thing or two. Actually, he knew a thing or two or three. Oh, fuck. I wish I could have found. He knew a thing or two or three. Hold on. Show transcript. The other two things before this I don't really care about. Knew a thing. Okay. Oh, we were almost there, I think.
When Mel Gibson made his film Passion of the Christ, he seemed to have started off by blaming Jewish moneylenders or the Jews in the temple for Christ's killing, and then he was forced to change the script. I don't see why anyone should be forced to change anything. Express your point of view. If somebody disagrees with it, let them disagree. I don't see why one has to get so excited about it. In the case of David Irving, David Irving was a very good historian. I don't care what Richard Evans says. He was a very good historian. He produced works which are substantive. And I happen to have read the Goebbels diary, his book on Goebbels. He had stolen the plates, which were stolen the plates of the diaries, and then wrote a book on it. I thought the book was frankly mediocre, but it certainly should have been published. Mediocre books. There are about 1,000 mediocre books published each month versus one good book. So if it falls in the category of mediocre, okay, not a big deal. I don't see why one would want to stop publication of it. It doesn't register with me. You don't like it, don't read it. They actually...
What is the, if you don't like it, don't read it? If you don't like it, then don't read it. Why would this not apply to the Charlie Hebdo publication? If you don't like it, don't look at the magazine. But he supported the shooters going in and killing the 13 staff? But David Irving, who is a history revisionist, not in a good sense of any sense of the word, who was a shoddy historian, right? Like, you're going to say that he should be publishing all of his stuff and people should openly debate, blah, 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 but like the Charlie Hebdo people, it was fine for them to get killed?
In the case of Irving, he knew a thing or two. Actually, he knew a thing or two or three. He is competent, and so far as I can tell. The same thing with this rapper, Mr. Wiley. I had some correspondence this morning and last night with Jamie Sternweiner and with Deborah McColby, because I asked them to prime me for today. Jamie was kind enough to send me all the tweets. Some of the tweets I agree with Jackie Walker. Some of the tweets were awful.
Stop. Hold on, real quick. Don't do this retarded levels of charitability. You're fucking retarded. Destiny, he said that he had no sympathy, not that he supported the Charlie Hebdo shooting. When you're giving justification after justification, like, oh, well, you know, Muslims are poor and beat up and look at all the blah, blah, blah. And, you know, listen, if you're going to post sadistic shit and somebody's going to come in and kill you, like, I don't feel any sympathy at all for you, you're bordering on support at that point, okay? Fuck off. That is so fucking bad faith. It sounds like from this guy, if somebody were to go and kill David Irving, I doubt that he'd be like, oh, well, you know, David Irving was basically a Holocaust revisionist and he'd basically stand the fuck out of Hitler. I can understand. It doesn't sound like he would say the same thing about David Irving.
I guess. Some of them were provocative, I suppose you'd call it. I mean, some of the tweets, I have to say, one of the tweets, the first one that Jamie sent me was with the pictures of the Bolsheviks who were allegedly responsible for the Bolsheviks and their comrades, who were allegedly responsible for the murder of millions of Christians. And they had a picture of Leo Jogishis. I thought to myself, who even knows who he is? I know who he is. He was Rosa Luxemburg's first lover. And he was the head of the Polish left-wing Communist Party.
Russia had the right to invade Ukraine. Why aren't there any reasonable people on any of these topics?
I'll begin my remarks on the Ukraine by noting that just before this...
I'm curious, hold on, before we get into this, Norman Finkelstein, Israel 6-day war. Now, I could be wrong, but do you think that he says that Israel invaded Egypt with no provocation? But then do you think he's going to say that Russia had every reason to invade Ukraine? What do we think? Oh no, hold on, I'm sorry. Finkelstein's book was literally the pages that we read that was quoted to us by Mouthy Infidel. He doesn't think that, right? Because I think he'd literally written a book about this. Damn, he plays this Holocaust card super hard. Holy shit. More than any like pro-Zionist Jew I've ever seen in my entire life. Once the U.S. in effect gave Israel the green or amber light at the end of May and early June, Israel did a repeat performance of 56. Its primary goal was to neuter Nasir? I feel like I always fuck this guy's names up. Nasir, to deliver a death blow to these uppity Arabs and finish off what was called radical Arab nationalism. Their secondary goal was to conquer the lands that they had coveted but didn't manage to seize in 48, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, the Golan. Tom Segev's book, 1967, is not great, but it does copiously document Israel's expansionist territorial aims on the eve of 67. It also makes clear that Israel had already resolved at the end of May to conquer the West Bank even if Jordan stayed out of the war. The notion that Israel didn't covet the West Bank and even warned King Hussein not to enter the war so as to avoid a conflict with it's hogwash. King Hussein feared that Jordan would be isolated and an easy prey once Israel knocked out Egypt. He figured, rightly, that Israel was going to attack the kingdom anyway. Okay. So better to join in while the Arabs still had a fighting chance of stopping Israel. Oh my God. No one under 60 will have a grasp of the prominence and importance of Nasser, both within the so-called Arab world and in Israel as well as at large. He's still the most famous Arab leader, although Saddam Hussein may be kind of caught up with him. '56 was not an exception. Eisenhower and his influential Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, both loathed Nasser. They just didn't think the timing was right for an armed attack. The moment wasn't yet ripe. Dulles was very conflicted once the British-French-Israeli invasion got underway. The British, having gone in, should not have stopped, Dulles told Eisenhower, until they toppled Nasser. How do we pronounce this guy's names? Hold on. Wait, Nasser. Fuck, how do you say this guy's name? Nasser, Egypt. I've said this, we've read this guy's name so many fucking times. Say it one time.
Best known for his charisma and pan-Arab populism, Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser enraptured listeners with his radio broadcast. Populism, Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser and
Nasser? Fuck, this guy has like an accent. Nasser? So-called Arabists hold up Eisenhower as a model to be emulated, but he wanted to dispose of Nasser just as much as anyone else. But didn't the US literally pull back? Like, the US literally pulled back this whole invasion, right? I'm pretty sure it was with intense US pressure. That's what eventually caused Israel and the French and British to pull out of here. Even as things begin to shift under Kennedy, the real break comes after the 67 war. The U.S. now sees Israel as a first-class fighting force, a strategic asset that could protect its critical regional interests. What's your take on historians who allege Israel had no aggressive designs in 1967? There was a lot of confusion and conflict among its leadership. Yes, there was some confusion and conflict. There was a lot more unity of purpose. They all agreed on exploiting the opportunity of war to expand Israel's borders, but some disagreement did exist on which territories to conquer and in what sequence. It's telling that Benny Morris, suspends his archival history before the 1967 war. In my opinion, I can't prove it. It's only a hunch. It's because 1948 is politically a dead issue. As former Israeli Foreign Minister Shlomo Ben Ami shrewdly observed in Scars of War, Wounds of Peace, the salient outcome of the 1967 war was it legitimized the borders that Israel conquered in 1948. That is to say, after the 1967 war, the Arabs had no choice except to recognize Israel as a state and its pre-1967 borders. Morris, the loyal citizen, recoiled at the prospect of such a scholarly undertaking because every commonplace about 67 is either a half-truth or an outright lie. The full truth casts Israel in a harsh light. How does he defend? I want to hear the Russian invasion defense then. I'm so curious.
This program began, I was watching a presentation by Jeffrey Sachs. He was speaking to a Chilean audience. And Jeffrey said...
Wait, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Hold on. The truth behind Biden's visit, the hospital massacre, and Biden's lie. Hezbollah and Iran stated that unless Israeli attacks on civilians ceased, they would intervene. 2, Israel panicked. It can carry out massacres of defenseless populations, but it can't fight ground wars. What? It has dreaded a ground war in Gaza, let alone fighting the party of God. Israel begged Biden to visit to protect it from a second front war. When Israel carried out the hospital massacre, he was repeating this 10 days later? Or wait, when was the... No, that's not 10 days later. I don't remember when the hospital thing happened. Biden agreed to lie about the attack only if Israel agreed to cease its genocidal plan in Gaza and allowing humanitarian aid. Biden lied exactly as Lyndon Baines Johnson lied in June of 1967 when Israel attacked the USS Liberty, killing 34 American crewmen. Both LBJ and Biden lied to protect a key ally and, not incidentally, a domestic electoral asset. Biden will now be praised for his statesmanship in standing by Israel and enabling humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. Holy shit. Okay, sorry. I just want to hear some of this. I'm so sorry.
Sachs, as many of you know, is a very respected economist, and he's been very active on the international scene since his late 20s. He was actually, I think, for worse, not for better. He was a major advisor to Boris Yeltsin beginning in 1992. And in my opinion, but that's not for now, he is
the hospital meme was on October 17th.
Significantly culpable for the catastrophe that ensued in Russia under Yeltsin's leadership, a catastrophe of a magnitude such that you could say Yeltsin, with the advice of Jeffrey Sachs, or I should say Jeffrey Sachs, through Yeltsin, was singularly responsible for bringing Vladimir Putin into power. But that's another time and another place. I mentioned Jeffrey Sachs because the question of Ukraine obviously came up during this presentation, and I was surprised, but also, if I can use the word, I was gratified to hear that he said, and now I think I'm quoting him verbatim, but you all can check. All you have to do is go to YouTube and enter Jeffrey Sachs, Chile. He said, I think I'm quoting him verbatim, he said, the U.S. caused the war in Ukraine. He didn't limit himself to saying the U.S. provoked the war. He said the U.S. caused the war in Ukraine. And for those of you who follow these debates, these discussions, it's in my opinion, it's a critical distinction. Because many people, obviously not a majority, but a significant number of people have been willing to say that the U.S. and NATO, the U.S. provoked the war. However, they stopped short of saying the U.S. caused the war, but instead say, notwithstanding the provocations by the U.S. and NATO, notwithstanding the provocations, they say that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was criminal. And I'm not aware of anyone, except for myself, and I think Sachs comes pretty close when he says caused the war. My position has been from day one of the war that Russia had the right to attack, but, and it's not a big but it's a but. There's a difference between having a right and exercising that right. And I have said from the beginning, Russia had the right to attack. However, I cannot say with any kind of certainty that it was a wise or a prudent thing to attack. To me, those are separate questions. But on the, let's call it on the moral question, it's my view they had the right to attack. Now, what I would like to do in this few minutes that we're going to talk about the Ukraine and then hearing from you is to make an analogy and then see how you react to it. My area of professional expertise is the Israel-Palestine conflict, and so I'm going to make a comparison with that conflict, or an analogy. So, a lot of you will not remember for reasons of age, but the critical turning point in the Israel-Palestine conflict came in 1967. The 1967 war, sometimes called the Six
I'm so curious how he's anti-Israel here and pro-Russia.
Day War, but we'll just call it the June 1967 war. Now, there's no question, as a factual matter, that Israel fired the first shot. Israel denied it for about a week that it fired the first shot, but after about a week or 2 weeks, I can't remember now.
Did they, hold on, Israel denied it for a week? What is he referring to? I thought they denied it that day when their planes went to bomb Egypt. Were their shots fired before June 5th? I thought it was within a day. How could they have denied firing the first, well, hold on. How long Israel deny planes bombing Egyptian airfields? Can we find this? I thought it was like for hours. Let's check. Why would they deny it for a week? Yeah, I thought they just denied it for that day. I thought it was like for 12 hours or something, or some number of hours. Egyptians hinder their own defenses by doing some dumb shit. Powerful Jordanian prevented the warning. The runway was spared. He's saying they denied being responsible for the first shot, not that they never shot at all. No, he's saying that they denied firing the first shots. I thought that they did deny it for a few hours, but I didn't think it was for a week or two. Control F, denied. Controversies relating to the Six-Day War. Controversies. Preemptive strike. Initially, both Egypt and Israel announced that they've been attacked by the other country. Gideon Raphael, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, received a message from the Israeli Foreign Office, informed immediately the president of the Secretary Co that Israel is now engaged in repelling Egyptian land and air forces. At 3:10 a.m., Raphael woke Ambassador Hans Tabor, the Danish president, and the Security Council for June, Tabor, with the news that Egyptian forces had moved against Israel, and Israel responding to a cowardly and treacherous attack from Egypt. At the Security Council meeting of the June 5th, both Israel and Egypt claimed to be repelling an invasion by the other, and Israeli officials, Iban and Evron, swore that Egypt had fired first. On June 5th, Egypt, supported by the USSR, charged Israel with aggression. Israel claimed that Egypt had struck first, telling the council that in the early hours of the morning, Egyptian armored columns moved in an offensive thrust against Israel's borders. At the same time, blah, blah, blah. This is all a lie, I think, right? Israel just flew and blew other shit up. Though Israel had struck first, Israel initially claimed it was attacked first. Later, it claimed that its attack was a preemptive strike in the face of a planned invasion. Israel justifies its preemptive attack. Economic strength, the imminence of war on three fronts. According to Israeli historian, the Arabs had planned. Some historians state, I'm so curious how long they denied this. Israel's taxonomy decided by... Maybe I never read this. Maybe I just assumed that they switched that they admitted this like hours later. Damn, if anybody can find this piece of information, I'd be super interested to know. BBC Panorama. What is this saying it's a source to? He's claiming they didn't acknowledge that they fired first until after the war. Yeah, that's what he's saying. I'm just curious if that was true or not. On June 5th, Israel launched a strike against Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, which became known as the Six-Day War. Israel claimed it was a preemptive strike in the face of a planned invasion. The war lasted 6 days. Israel victory in the UN passed Resolution 242, which was the inadmissibility of the question. Damn. Okay, well, if anybody can find this, I'd be curious, but regardless.
With precision, Israel frankly admitted, because the evidence is overwhelming, that they fired the first shot. However, they claim that they had a right to launch the attack on the neighboring Arab countries, they being Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. And their argument went something like this. Ali Abin, who was the foreign minister of Israel at the time, in his memoir, he had a famous chapter called To Live or to Die. To Live or to Die. And in this chapter, he builds up a scenario such that Israel had no choice. So he says, number one, that Egypt had sealed the Straits of Tiran. That's a waterway that led to a port in Israel's south. And he said in his famous metaphor He said, after the sealing of the Straits of Tiran, Israel was now breathing with one lung. Then he said, Egypt had moved approximately 100,000 troops into the Sinai, the Egyptian Sinai, and they were poised to attack. And then he said, at the end of May, Egypt signed a joint agreement with Jordan, an alliance aimed at Israel. So he takes this accumulation of facts. Israel is breathing with one lung. Egypt is poised to attack. It has 100,000 troops in the Sinai. At the end of May, an agreement is struck between Egypt and Jordan. A defense pact is struck between them. And he says, when you take this accumulation of facts, that Israel had no option but to attack. And it fired the first shot. Now, as it turned out, it's easy to demonstrate that all the claims Israel made were flat out false.
James Crawford, Destiny is on the left wing. He's basically a neocon, moderate Republican that likes big government with hawk foreign policy. Okay.
But that's not going to concern claims Israel made were flat out false. But that's not going to concern me now.
Wait, which one of those claims is false? Did Egypt not mobilize troops on the border? Did Egypt not sign a defensive pact with Jordan? Did Egypt not close those straits? What does he mean by each of those claims was false? I'm curious.
Extensively documented it in various publications, as have many, many other historians, in particular Israeli historians. But that's not going to concern me now. My point is, were the facts true that Israel was facing a to live or to die situation? Were those facts true? Then it would seem to me that Israel would have a case for firing the first shot. In fact, if you go back and look at the record, very few people immediately after the war, when the facts were not yet known, except everybody knew Israel launched the attack, it fired the first shot, very few people were willing to criticize Israel because the facts seemed to convey as Abba Egan put it, or a do or die situation. So I would say that in the case of Russia and Ukraine, the facts are true. Those facts being, number one, from 1989, which is true. Those facts being, number one, from 1989, which is not a short time ago at this point. Quite a few people on the screen now were not even born in 1989. From 1989, every Russian leader, bar none, was calling for a halt to NATO expansion, or was told, this was at the very beginning, or was promised that there would not be a NATO expansion. That fact, to me, you can go through all the technicalities of whether it was a verbal agreement, whether it was a written agreement, what the archives show. That, to me, is of secondary importance. It was clear from the get-go, beginning with Gorbachev in 1989, that the Russians understood there would not be a NATO expansion. And from the moment the NATO expansion began, the Russians were constantly remonstrating to stop the NATO expansion.
From 89, can somebody help me understand this? Why would we be talking about, and I could just be wrong, why would we be talking about NATO expansion in 89? Was there any place for NATO to expand to? NATO versus Warsaw Pact, 1991, 1990 map? Like how many other countries could it even expand to? Like pretty much every country. What do we have in here? We've got like Yugoslavia, Austria, and the Czech Republic. Oh, and then I guess Sweden and Finland. There's like not much more room to expand here. Like basically everybody's taken sides. Is NATO expansion really like a massive thing at this point? I don't even know I don't know where these quotes come from. I feel like every single time somebody talks about NATO expansion, all they bring up is that 1 inch eastward quote from Baker. That's the only thing that they cite. But I feel like if you look at the time period, I just don't know if the expansion of NATO makes much sense. Because like you've got your non-aligned countries, you've got your first and second world, and then there's not much else to happen, right? Like, but I don't know. Okay.
Number two, after let's just call it, because I don't want to get into a quarrel on semantics. After the non-constitutional change of government in Ukraine in 2014, after that non-constitutional change of government in Ukraine in 2014,
he calls it non-constitutional, but elections were held after, oh my God, I've forgotten all the names. Not Poroshenko, after, Euromaidan, the ousting of Yanukovych. After Yanukovych fled, they did their little parliamentary thing to say, okay, well, our leaders abandoned us, but then they held elections. It's not like it was an actual, like, installation of a different military dictator or installation of a new dictator. Like, they did elections.
A significant part of the Ukrainian government, formal and informal, was now composed of representatives of Nazi or far-right organizations, which were fanatically
What?
Of Nazi or far-right organizations, composed part of the Ukrainian government, formal and informal, was now composed of representatives of Nazi or far-right organizations, which were fanatically anti-Russian. Now, I'm not going to go into the percentages, but...
Bro, wasn't it like, didn't the far-right party have like 1 seat in 2014? Was it 1 seat? What are we talking about here?
In my opinion, it's not open to debate that, because it's a factual matter, that critical security and military positions in the government after the unconstitutional change of government belong to far-right Nazi parties. That's fact number 2.
And that's just not open for debate? Who are the far-right Nazis? Who are the far-right Nazis in Ukraine controlling critical defense infrastructure?
Fact number 3 was Russia made clear that the expansion of NATO to Georgia and Ukraine would be red lines for them.
Well, good thing Georgia didn't join fucking NATO because Russia fucking invaded them. And good thing Ukraine didn't join NATO because Russia fucking invaded them. How can you say that countries joining NATO is a red line? It's a casus belli for us to attack. Destiny, I mean, it was unconstitutional, but it's such a bad argument that Putin himself welcomed the elections and recognized the transition, which should always be brought up. Those who say it was invalid because it was formally unconstitutional are more extreme in the case of Putin was. Also, when you say it was unconstitutional, I believe that the initial way, you have to qualify that. My understanding is that the initial way that they declared that Yanukovych had like abandoned the government, that initial part didn't actually go by the process that it was supposed to. That part, I don't think you could argue. I think that part was inarguably unconstitutional, but it's not like that followed with the installation of a random like dictator or leader. Like they resumed and they held elections post 2014, and that's where the new leadership came from. The actual deposing of Yanukovych, I believe that part was unconstitutional because it didn't follow the letter of how they were supposed to do it. But then they held elections afterwards. That's a critical thing to bring up. Okay, I think that's incredibly critical. To just call the entirety of it unconstitutional, you're clearly trying to work in bad faith against what happened in that circumstance.
In particular with Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine share about a 1,000-mile border. I can't remember now, but I think it's 900-mile border. And there was significant concern about U.S. NATO missiles being placed along that border within 5 minutes distance of key Russian cities. Beyond that, there was the attempts again by Russia at the end of December 2021, going into February 2022, of proposing various diplomatic settlements of the conflict. And the steady response of the NATO head, Jens Stoltenberg, to every proposal that was made by Russia, Stoltenberg replied, and here I'll give you as close as I can to a verbatim statement. He said, "Everything between NATO and any other government is our business, not yours."
True.
And the Russians made 2 proposals.
I like how he goes to 1989 in discussions about NATO expansion in 1989, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure most of those discussions, or at least everything that I've ever seen, when you go back and you read the original declassified documents, everything about NATO expansion and all of that really just had to do with the reunification of Germany, and especially the stationing of weapons in East Germany, which I believe to this day is still demilitarized. I could be wrong. That might have changed recently, but that was the huge deal, was the reunification of Germany and the expansion of NATO and military installations in East Germany. That was the huge thing. But also, 88, 89, 90, we're taking talks back then between the Soviet Union and the United States. That's stretching forward to justify an invasion into Georgia in 2005? That's stretching forward to justify an invasion to Ukraine in 2014? What?
to NATO and one directly to the US. And the response by NATO was, we will not promise that missiles will not...
Was it 2008? I thought the conflicts in Georgia started in 2005. Georgia conflicts, Russia. 2008 was the invasion. Didn't shit start 3 years earlier? I thought it did. I might just be making that up. Yeah, never mind. Okay, 2008, not 2005. I might have made that up.
Stationed in Ukraine, they said, we reserve the right to station defensive missiles. Now, when you're within 5 minutes of Russia's major cities, the distinction between offensive and defensive missiles, I think, but I'm not a military person.
Oh, thank you for this page. Israel's Air Force attacked Jordan's and Syria's aircraft in the manner it had done to Egypt's, and by the evening of June 5th, it destroyed the air warfare capacity of all three. Messages sent by the U.S. telling that Israel did not plan to limit its attack. Wait, this is a totally new claim I've never seen before. Wait, what's the source for this claim? Hold on. Messages intercepted by a U.S. intelligence ship, according to Wilbur Crane Eveland of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, indicated that Israel did not plan to limit its attacks to Egypt. Israel intercepted and doctored Egypt's communications to Jordan and Syria, Eveland said, to make them believe Egypt had repelled Israel's invasion. Wait, is that true? What is this footnote on 29? My understanding was that, or at least what I've read, was that Egypt misrepresented how that air battle went to Jordan. This is saying that Israel actually intercepted and doctored those messages to mislead Egypt. Is that true? This is the book. Here are the remaining pieces of that chapter. So believe their chance, so they continue fighting. By the time a ceasefire was effected on June 8th, Israel took the West Bank, Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt charged Israel with aggression. As the Yusar, but Israel claimed that Egypt struck first by the consulate in the early hours this morning at the same time. The next day, Foreign Minister Abba Iban repeated this version of events at the council in the morning. In fact, Egypt had not attacked by land or air, and none of its aircraft had approached Israel. Neither the Security Council nor the General Assembly could take a stand on the hostilities. The United States, according to President Lyndon Johnson, was aware that Israel had initiated the hostilities, but it supported Israel's claim that Egypt attacked it. With its permanent members split on the issue, the Security Council condemned neither side for the aggression. The General Assembly on July 4th defeated a Soviet proposed resolution would have named Israel the aggressor on July 7th. On July 7th, Eshkol acknowledged that Israel had struck first. This is a month later, abandoning Israel's position that Egypt had initiated the hostilities, because it was June. But Eshkol said Israel's attack... Okay, so this was a month later that they acknowledged the attack first? Is that how much time passed? Whose book is this? 1967. Wait, can somebody tell me the author of this book is? I'm just curious, just so I know. Appearances often are deceiving. John Quigley. The source that he cites for this is International Law and Outbreak of War in the Middle East, 1967, Orbis, Volume 11, page 692. Damn, can you find that for me? Huh, okay, that's interesting. I did not know that was true. Sorry, okay, back to this.
I think any reasonable person would say that distinction is meaningless. And secondly, NATO responded that we will station troops in Ukraine, not on a permanent basis, but on a rolling basis. That means we'll station some troops, then replace them with other troops, then replace them with other troops. Permanent defensive missiles, I think, stationed in Ukraine, they said, we reserve the right to station defensive missiles. Now, when you're within 5 minutes of Russia's major cities, the distinction between offensive and defensive missiles, I think, but I'm not a military person, I think any reasonable person would say that distinction is meaningless. And secondly, NATO responded...
Hold on. Is that... I thought that... was it under Obama or Biden? I thought... Didn't we explicitly allow Russians into these missile installations to investigate whether or not they felt like the installations were being misused? I thought the United States had explicitly allowed Russia weapons investigators to come in and check specifically for. It wasn't for Ukraine though. It might have been in the Baltics. Was it part of the SALT agreements? Strategic arms limitation talks. SALT 1 and SALT 2. I only know this from Metal Gear Solid. But okay.
That we will station troops in Ukraine, not on a permanent basis, but on a rolling basis. That means we'll station some troops, then replace them with other troops, then replace them with other troops. But the bottom line is clear. There will be NATO missiles and NATO troops stationed in Ukraine. Now, I'll say for the last point of the comparison. And the last point of the comparison is this. When Abin made his speeches at the UN, Abba Abin, the Israeli foreign minister, when he made his speeches, he kept referring back to the Nazi Holocaust and the extermination of between 5 and 6 million Jews. And he was saying that Israel now faces another Holocaust. So that served as the backdrop. That served as the backdrop for his defense of Israel to launch the attack. Now, as I said, if you go through the evidence, everything Abba Abin said about the blockade of the Straits of Tiran, about the Egyptian troops in the Sinai, about the pact with Jordan, all of it was nonsense.
What does he mean when he says all of that was nonsense? Is he saying none of that happened, or that they weren't good justifications or causes for war? I really wish he would expand on that.
However, it served to make a compelling case. And I say, just as Israel had the right to invoke the backdrop of the Nazi Holocaust, Russia has the right to invoke the fact that 27 million, that's the current number, 27 million Soviet people were exterminated during World War II.
By who? By NATO? What is the comparison? The Holocaust happened 20 years before the 6 Day War. 20 to 25 years before the 6 Day War. World War II was like 80 years or 70 years before. And what is that? How are we even involved? What are we even talking about? Wait, what? I need to invade Ukraine because we lost 20 million plus civilians to Nazi Germany, a country that doesn't exist anymore, when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union at the time? What are we even talking about?
Russia on the east, Germany on the Eastern Front fought a war of extermination. They wanted to create what they called Lebensraum, living space for Germans, an expanding German population, and so they proceeded to engage in a war of annihilation, a war of extermination. And the Soviet people, suffered a loss, not quite the magnitude of the Nazi Holocaust directed at Jews, but certainly of a magnitude which, in my opinion, justified its right to say, sorry, Mr. Stoltenberg, but stationing missiles in Ukraine on our border, which in a matter of time almost certainly would be nuclear-tipped missiles, it is our business. It is our business. And in light of that, I believe they had the right to attack. Should they have? I don't know. I'm not a military person. But I don't accept the argument because I do not believe it makes logical sense. I do not accept the argument that, yes, it's true, Russia provoked. Yes, it's true, Russia provoked. Yes, it's true, Russia provoked. But then after listing the 10,000 Russian provocations, we then hear, but the invasion was criminal. That doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't compute. Unless you can show me a significant option, a significant non-violent diplomatic option that Russia had but didn't exercise. If you can show me a significant option that Russia had but didn't exercise, then of course my argument is not compelling. But so far as I could tell, all I heard was Russia needed to give more time to diplomacy. More time to diplomacy. I'm thinking to myself, more time to diplomacy? I should think more than 30 years, 3 decades, is an awful lot of time. 3 decades, that's an awful lot of time. And if they miss one possible option, one tiny option, which I don't even know what it is, but if they missed it, I find it far-fetched in the extreme, given that track record that the US or NATO would have agreed to it. I see no basis for that fact. The US was determined with NATO. They were determined to subordinate Russia, to put Russia in a position that it would have to accept any ultimatum coming from the US and NATO, or else face military might on its border. And there is no way, in my opinion, that any offer the Russians made, short of surrender, would have evoked a positive reaction from the West. I see no evidence of that. Okay, now...
we live in totally different realities. I don't even know who's like attached to the planet right now. I don't think the analogy holds, though it is worth bringing up as a possibility. Russia had already seen the evidence of Ukrainian brutality in the Donbass. Over 14,000 people had been killed between 2014 and 2022. They also knew that Ukraine was planning a major offensive to take in the region beginning on February 16, 2022, and had been positioning soldiers there for that offensive. Yeah, it's in their country. That's their country. That's inside their country. Thus, as a preemptive attack, Russia had more justification than Israel did in 1967. The Donbass is not part of Russia. There was clear evidence of a need for a humanitarian intervention. The only reason that war was continuing was because Russia was arming everybody in it's Luhansk and Donetsk. Donetsk? How do we pronounce these? Luhansk. Fuck, I can't pronounce this shit. And Donetsk. Fucking give it to me. Luhansk and Donetsk. These two areas. And in early phases of the war, I saw an interview with another American scholar on politics on the CGTN network who said the same thing. Oh, well, officially they weren't. Maybe officially they weren't, but everybody knew they were. Also, that 14K number includes literally all deaths in 8 years of conflict, including Ukrainians, Russian soldiers, and civilians. Yes. Jesus. Okay, sorry. What a wild dive. He wholesale denies that Hamas uses human shields. Is this, do we need to like find like more sources on this? I'm pretty sure I see like every other day there's like stories of like, and even in the past that Hamas is just like avowedly, they don't even hide it. I don't think Hamas even denies it, that they store weapons in schools, that they use hospitals as military bases, or are we like denying all of it? Are we saying none of this is true?
Okay, calm down.
Not to focus on Amy Schumer again, but I think her social media is illustrative of a certain perspective that we're seeing. And there's so much Hasbara out there, which is like explanation.
Yeah, explanation in the sense of propaganda.
Right, it's right, yeah.
It's a thin line between explanation and propaganda.
Yeah. So she shared this infographic, Instagram thing. Everyone is asking what is going to happen to innocent civilians in Gaza? Where can they go? Israel's stance. Israel wants to evacuate as many innocent civilians from Gaza as possible. Why? Israel intends to minimize civilian casualties. Hamas intentionally embeds itself within civilian areas, making it exceptionally difficult for Israel to target them without harming civilians. Israel often refrains from striking Hamas targets like hospitals and schools where it knows Hamas is hiding or holding weapons. The IDF routinely warns civilians to evacuate before it bombs and gives locals detailed instructions on how to evacuate.
I'm going to just stop you there. I would say the last 40 years of my life, about 80% was devoted to reading human rights reports. Not once, not twice. I read most of them around 3 times. So I can say with a certain amount of certitude that the statements I'm going to make to you now have a lot of documentary authority. Yes. They command a lot of documentary authority. If you take the case of the human shielding, you go back and you look, for example, I'm taking one example, there are many. If you take the case of human shielding, Amnesty International, after Operation Cast Lead, put out an extensive report. It was titled 22 Days of Death and Destruction. And it looked at the question of human shielding because that came up already in 2008 during Operation Cast Lead. Yeah, it was a huge talking point.
And still is, yeah.
Amnesty International found that there was no evidence that Hamas had engaged in human shielding. However, that's only half the story. The other half of it is there was extensive evidence that Israel engaged in human shielding. It forced Palestinians to sit by tanks and artillery as they were fired. It walked Palestinians and fired from the shoulders of Palestinians. It stood in windows, it puts the Palestinians in windows and fired behind them. So Ms. Schumer is twice wrong. There was no evidence on the strict issue of human shielding that Hamas engaged in it. There is a lot of evidence that Israel engaged in it. Human shielding is a narrow term. I should say it's a term of art. It doesn't have like a scientific precision, but it usually means when you conscript a civilian to commit an unwanted act in the course of war. Is there evidence that Hamas fired weapons? It's a separate issue in the human rights literature, though I acknowledge these are not scientifically precise terms. Did Hamas fire from areas which were densely populated? And the answer is yes. However, in general, there was no, this is Gaza.
Yeah, it's a very dense place.
There wasn't a place to fire from. And I'm not going to go into all the technical points because there's so many gradations.
Right.
In my book, I go through each gradation one by one to cover all possible challenges.
It's one thing that is very sus. I'm just reading through this. One thing that's like very sus also is he's quoting one document for 22 days of conflict as well, which is this is a much more specific claim than the one that he's defending here, that Hamas never uses human shields because of this one report that he's citing.
Hello?
Hey, what's up?
He's talking about Operation Cast Lead. So here's I'm going to send you a case law link from International Committee of the Red Cross. Hamas absolutely used human shields in this conflict. If you see that link I sent you.
What, hold on. Why would you think Amnesty International disagreed?
Well, did they actually? What did they say?
I don't know. I'm scrolling through, but they're making the argument that like when Israel was advancing through territory, they didn't evacuate civilians from their houses. So they're making the argument that Israel was using human shields. But
my guess is
they're saying that it seems like they're saying Palestinians or Hamas didn't use human shields.
My guess is you won't find them saying that, or they're just contrary information. But like, if you go to like, do you see the link that I sent you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I'm control of it. I'm like 22 to 4. I'm just looking for the human shields here. Okay. But positions in and around Palestine. Okay. Some of the properties targeted in the Israeli air bombardment campaign or in other attacks by Israeli forces may have been used to store or manufacture rockets whose destruction would not violate international humanitarian law. In other cases, destruction of and damage to homes and other civilian property resulted from armed confrontations between Israeli forces and Palestinian militants after Israeli forces entered Gaza on the 3rd of January and took positions in and around Palestinian villages and the outskirts of towns. In these areas, both Israeli forces and Palestinian militants used Palestinian homes and other civilian properties as combat positions. However, in reality, the targeting military objectives and incidental damage resulting from such attacks or from armed confrontations account for only some of the overall devastation. Okay, so this makes it sound like they did use human shields to some extent, and that's if I don't read the stuff earlier saying that. But families human shields. Sorry. Okay, you can talk if you want. Go
ahead. If you go to the link that I sent you, and you go to point 169, that's the funniest one to me. It's kind of in a very sad way, but yeah.
Control F 169. Am I missing something? Are you sure?
It's like, I think you can't control F.
Because it's the formatting of the page. During the Gaza operations, Hamas frequently commandeered the homes of civilians as temporary bases to attack Israeli forces. What about this?
Like they commandeered people's houses to use as military bases. It's like.
I thought this was just accepted, but who's this? Who's reporting this? What is Casebook? What is this website?
It's International Committee of the Red Cross. They're kind of like there's like, I think the two big people you read for cases for international law and like when it comes to wars, I think is ICC and ICRC.
Okay.
But yeah, they've got like a whole thing here of this is from the same operation he's talking about, and they go through a whole thing of like numerous different examples of where they spend more time actually condemning Hamas than they condemn Israel in this, although they condemn a few Israeli actions, just for the amount of times that they put all their stuff in mosques and schools and buildings and shit like that.
Okay. Also, never mind. Hold on. This Amnesty International thing might be more. This might be more critical of Israel than Hamas, but I don't think it agrees with how Norman Finkelstein cited this. I control F'd it to look for this particular thing. He's saying that they said Hamas did not use human shields, but I mean, like, it seems like the Amnesty International report that he cited disagrees with them. Hamas and other armed groups also endangered Palestinian civilians by failing to take all feasible precautions in the conduct of their military activities, notably by firing rockets from residential areas and storing weapons, explosives, and ammunition in them. They also mixed with the civilian population, although this would be difficult to avoid in the small and overcrowded Gaza Strip, and there's no evidence they did so with the intent of shielding themselves. I don't know what evidence you're looking for there, but the extremely high population density in Gaza, a small territory and one of the most densely populated places in the world, that's not true, entails additional challenges for all the parties involved in conflict or armed confrontations. Notwithstanding these difficulties, Hamas and other armed groups have an obligation to avoid conduct which, by intent or through recklessness, exposes the civilian population to danger, and have an obligation not to use the civilian population as a cover for their military activities. Intentionally using civilians as shields, or to shield a military objective offered to as using human shields, is a war crime. Hamas and other Palestinian groups endangered civilians by firing rockets from populated residential neighborhoods. In one case, local residents told Amnesty International that Hamas fighters had fired a rocket at night from the courtyard of a government school in the center of Gaza City during Operation Cast Lead, when the schools were closed, and that the fighters were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the street as they were leaving the schoolyard. In another case, a resident saw Hamas fighters setting up a rocket launcher in the middle of a road in Gaza City at night. In another area of Gaza City, a resident showed Amnesty International delegates a place from where a rocket had been launched, a small patch of empty land some 50 meters from residential houses. Television footage from the Arabic TV station Al Arabiya, broadcast during Operation Cast Lead, also showed a presenter seemingly caught off guard, saying that she had just heard a rocket being fired from the street near the building which houses the TV station in the center of Gaza City. Okay, so he's just lying about this, or he's claiming to have read it and he didn't actually read it, or he just has no reading comprehension.
Yeah, I mean, because I made the claim about human shields a couple of weeks ago, and the most frequent pushback I got from it was that Finkelstein said otherwise. And I'm like, yeah, so I've looked at for that one he's talking about.
Yeah, I went down this stupid rabbit hole. This Finkelstein guy actually seems like he's fucking insane. Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I just thought he was like.
I think he's like academically discredited.
I looked into the academic discrediting, and it seemed kind of bullshit. Like when I looked at it, it seemed like he got discredited for bullshit reasons. Maybe I should go back and look over it. I felt like I was on his side for that discrediting stuff. But I
mean, all I know him for really is that he makes people cry in fucking lecture halls. But yeah, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, that one video that went viral or whatever, but he also believes that, like, it's interesting because I listened to a given analogy. He made the argument that Israel had absolutely no justification for thinking it was under threat to start the Six-Day War, but that if you use all the same conditions, Russia was fully justified in the invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, he's got some absolutely wild takes. He also said he had no sympathy for the dead journalists in the Charlie Hebdo building because they were basically poking and prodding at poor, sad Muslims with their comics. And yeah, he didn't have any sympathy when the shooter went in and killed 13 of them. Like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, this
he was
guy,
one of the people who compared Gaza to the Warsaw Ghetto, right?
He might have. I think there might have been a thing, but yeah.
Where they went in and they were getting what, like 100, like 70, 100, like less than 200 calories a day. Yeah. And where people got like fucking, where diseases were endemic within like a month. Yeah, that's probably not the best comparison.
Okay.
Are you doing this? Are we doing a debate in like 10 minutes or? Did you get asked onto a thing?
Oh, fuck me, bro. I just saw this. I can, but I have to leave at 8:30 tonight, so I'll be there for like 30 minutes. But yeah, if we want to, yeah, I guess.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. I'll see you soon.
Yep. Otherwise, I can do it for tomorrow. Love you. Be careful.
Human shielding is a narrow term. I should say it's a term of art. It doesn't have like a scientific precision, but it usually means when you conscript a civilian to commit an unwanted act in the course of war.
Oh, never mind. I missed this part. Oh, he's using an insanely narrow definition for human shield here. Oh, Jesus. Okay. So his definition of human shield is basically you tell a civilian you need to take up an arm and go fight, or you need to go do some military action or whatever.
narrow term. I should say it's a term of art. It doesn't have like a scientific precision, but it usually means when you conscript a civilian to commit an unwanted act in the course of war. Is there evidence that Hamas fired weapons? It's a separate issue in the human rights literature, though I acknowledge these are not scientifically precise terms. Did Hamas fire from areas which were densely populated? And the answer is yes. However, in general, there was no. This is Gaza.
Yeah, it's a very dense place.
There wasn't a place.
Well, but he's making it sound like they just happen to fire from these areas, like because the whole place is densely populated. That's a little misleading, but
to fire from. And I'm not going to go into all the technical points because there's so many gradations.
Right.
In my book, I go through each gradation one by one to cover all possible challenges.
Yeah.
Now, the evidence is overwhelming. In fact, I would say the evidence was shocking of Israel's targeting, not just of hospitals.
Sorry, people in chat are saying this is the legal definition of human shields. I don't believe that's right, but let's check. This is the International Humanitarian Law Database. Prohibition of human shields constitutes a criminal offense under the legislation of many states. It does not explicitly mention the use of human shields, but such practice to be prohibited. Several military manuals. Definition of human shields. The prohibition of using human shields in the Geneva Conventions, Additional Protocol 1, and the Statute of the International Criminal Court are couched in terms of using the presence or movements of civilians or other protected persons to render certain points or areas or military forces immune from military operations. If that's the definition of human shield, then I don't know where Norman Finkelstein is getting his definition from. Most examples given in military manuals, or which have been the object of condemnations, have been cases where persons were actually taken to military objectives in order to shield those objectives from attack. The military manuals of New Zealand and the United Kingdom give examples, the placing of persons in or next to ammunition trains. There were many condemnations of the threat by Iraq to round up and place prisoners of war and civilians in strategic sites and around military defense points. Other condemnations on the basis of the prohibition related to rounding up civilians and putting them in front of military units in the conflicts. Okay. The ICC also has another definition. Hold on. ICC, maybe, yeah, I don't know who we trust the most for. Boom, boom. Oh, utilizing the presence of... Wait, this is the same thing we're on. This is the ICC. International Humanitarian Law Database. This is the ICC. No, this is the ICRC. IHL is usually a good source for law. Okay. Definition of human shields. Okay. We have the indictments in the Karzik and Mel. Okay. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former qualified physically securing or otherwise holding peacekeeping forces against their will. Potential NATO air targets, including ammunition bunkers, a radar site, and communication center, as using human shields. Can be concluded the use of human shields requires the intentional co-location of military objectives, civilians, or persons, or hors-de combat with the specific intent of trying to prevent the targeting of those military. Okay, so this is, yeah. Okay, so I don't know what definition, I don't know where he's getting his definition of human shield. His is incredibly precise, but...
Where there were no militants present. But what was particularly appalling was the targeting of the ambulances. Now, I will give you an example of what this targeting looked like. Israel would target a civilian home, no evidence that there were any Hamas militants present in the home. The home is struck, people run out, and when they run out, they call the ambulance. Israel waits for the ambulance to come and then fires rockets at the ambulance.
Hey, Warner Box just said, and Quibbles both said they'd rather schedule for 1 tomorrow.
Okay, we can do it tomorrow. Be careful, love you.
All right, bye.
The most damning descriptions of what happened during those operations, they came from the Israeli soldiers. Go back and read, I'll give you the title slowly. Breaking the Silence. Read all they did was report what the soldiers told them during Operation Protective Edge. So it's going to be roughly 2014 or 2015. I won't comment further. Read it yourself. I couldn't bear it, or I was being ripped apart reading it. And bear in mind, these soldiers were not peaceniks. Not at all. They expressed no regrets. There was only one soldier in the 201 pages. That's what my memory tells me. I think it's right. Only one soldier in the 201 pages who expressed any regret. They were just matter of fact.
Destiny, war crime. Human shields at Article 8.2 Rome Statute of the ICC. Article 8.2b. Article 8. Article 8. War crimes. 8.2b. Are there serious violations of the laws, Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, are there serious violations of the laws and customs applicable in international armed conflict within the established framework of international law, namely any of the following acts? Intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population as such or against individual civilians, not taking part in direct hostilities, intentionally directing attacks against civilian objects, intentionally directing attacks against personal installations, intentionally launching an attack, instant loss, widespread long-term attacking or bombarding towns, villages, which are undefended and are not military objectives. Which part did you want me to read? Fuck. Okay, your message is gone. Making improper use of the flag of truce, transfer directly or indirectly back to primary, intentionally directing attacks against buildings dedicated to religion, subjecting person to power, declaring abolished. Section 23, you said. Utilizing the presence of a civilian or other protected person to render certain points, areas, or military forces immune from military operations. Okay. All right, okay. I don't know why we needed to go through all this. Fuck me. Jesus Christ. Do you think I'm gonna have time to finish this today? I didn't even... Bro, fuck me. At least, listen, at least you could 100% get normal on stream. Yeah, I think Aaron was reaching out to him apparently, so we'll see if he wants to come on and chat, I guess. The Holocaust industry. UK historian David Irving claims that the Jewish Holocaust industry silences its critics by a combination of intellectual terrorism and moral blackmail, and he has taken some of his opponents to court to attempt to prove it. It seems he may have some persuasive arguments on his side. Keep in mind, this is the court case that, like, forever disgraced Irving as, like, a, like, sham historian. Irving was one of, like, the largest, like, Holocaust revisionists. He also made the claim that Hitler had no direct knowledge that any Jews were even being killed, that Hitler had no idea because of some mistranslated documents and because of a fake document that he held onto longer than any other historian did. What was this called? Was it TB48? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Fuck, I'm not going to be able to remember this, but... But two central dogmas underpin the Holocaust framework. The Holocaust marks a categorically unique historical event and the climax of an irrational Gentile hatred of Jews. Although they became the centerpieces of Holocaust literature, neither figures at all in genuine scholarship on the Nazi Holocaust. Wait, what? On the other hand, both dogmas draw on important strands in Judaism and Zionism. The Holocaust uniqueness dogma became, according to Peter Novick, author of The Holocaust in American Life, axiomatic, a fetishism, and a cult in official Jewish discourse. No speech crime loomed larger than the use of the words Holocaust and genocide to describe other catastrophes. In an illuminating essay, historian David Stannard ridicules the small industry of Holocaust hagiographers, arguing for the uniqueness of the Jewish experience with all the energy and ingenuity of theological zealots. The uniqueness dogma makes no sense. Every historical event is unique, if merely by virtue of time and location, and every historical event bears distinct features as well as features in common with other historical events. What a worthless statement. Bro, who are these people? Wait, I'm so fucking confused. What? I feel like I read shit. What a stupid sentence. The anomaly of the Holocaust is that its uniqueness is held to be crucial. What other historical events, one might ask, is framed largely for its categorical uniqueness? Typically, distinctive features of the Holocaust are isolated in order to place the event itself in a category apart. Novick dismisses this gerrymandering technique as intellectual sleight of hand, which entails deliberately singling out one of the more distinctive features of the events and trivializing or sweeping under the rug those features it shares with other events to which it might be compared. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're trying to make something unique, you're going to talk about the unique parts. Obviously, there are going to be things in common with other things as well, right? All Holocaust writers agree that the Holocaust is unique, but few, if any, agree why. Each time an argument... wait, hold on. This is my understanding. My understanding for why the Holocaust is considered unique is, one, was scope. It involved more people than any other directed Holocaust ever. Two was ruthless efficiency, the parading of people into certain camps that were at efficiencies never seen in human history, not only working and killing people, but working, killing people, and cremating the bodies or hiding the evidence. Three was the fact that this wasn't just something that was happening as they invaded villages. This was something that, like, the military effort was being redirected to kill people. Like trains and supply lines were dedicated to shipping Jews to different places. Yeah, there was an ideological fervor even in newly invaded... Oh, God, I wish I remembered more. I'm pretty sure that when Hitler was even making agreements with other countries, that part of the agreement would required them to, like, Holocaust or ship part of their Jewish population to Germany. These are like the uniqueness of the Holocaust. Maybe there are other genocides that I'm not aware of that had like this same type of fervor behind it. The closest I can think of, maybe the Armenian genocide by the Turks, maybe, but I would have to get more into the Armenian genocide as well. To know that, I guess, for how comparable it is. Every time an argument for Holocaust uniqueness is empirically refuted, a new argument is adduced in its stead. The result, according to Jean Mitchell Schaumont, is multiple conflicting arguments that annul each other. Knowledge does not accumulate, rather, to improve on the former argument. Each new one starts from zero. In other words, uniqueness is a given in the Holocaust framework. Proving it is the appointed task, and disproving it is equivalent to Holocaust denial. Perhaps the problem lies with the premise, not the proof. Even if the Holocaust were unique, what difference would it make? How would it change your understanding if the Holocaust were not the first, but the fourth or fifth in a line of comparable catastrophes? The most recent entry into the Holocaust uniqueness sweepstakes is Stephen Katz's The Holocaust in Historical Context, citing nearly 5,000 titles. In the first of a projected 3-volume study, Katz surveys the full sweep of human history in order to prove that the Holocaust is phenomenologically unique by virtue of the fact that never before has a state set out as a matter of intentional principle and actualized policy to annihilate physically every man, woman, and child belonging to a specific people. His argument is that an historical event containing a distinct feature is a distinct historical event. Only a flea's hop separates the claim of Holocaust uniqueness from the claim that the Holocaust cannot be rationally apprehended. If the Holocaust is unprecedented in history, it must stand above and hence cannot be grasped by history. It is unique because it is inexplicable and inexplicable. Wait, what would he say? Does he think that, like, the atomic bombings are not like a unique... Dubbed by Novick the sacralization of the Holocaust, this mystification's most practiced purveyor is Eli Wiesel. For Wiesel, Novick observes, the Holocaust is effectively a mystery religion. It leads into darkness, negates all answers, lies outside if not beyond history, defies both knowledge and description, cannot be explained nor visualized. No. What is the argument that he makes here, I guess? Destiny, after going down these rabbit holes, has consensus history ever been wrong, or is it generally safe to trust it? I think academic consensus history is generally safe, but I mean, you probably have to be careful, I guess, who you're reading from. Consensus is probably safe-ish, I would imagine. Not all revisionist literature is totally worthless. Lipstadt brands UK historian David Irving one of the most dangerous spokespersons for Holocaust denial, yet Irving has also made indispensable contributions towards explaining Nazism. And Arno Mayer, in his important study of the Nazi Holocaust, as well as Raul Hilberg, cite Holocaust denial publications. Even if the world is in the right, Mill wrote in his essay on liberty, it is always provable that dissentients have something worth hearing to say for themselves, and that truth would lose something by their silence. Jesus. Okay, I'm curious if I go back and I watch, because Finkelstein is like really famous for, made this one Jewish student cry. I wonder what her question was now.
Hi, yeah. During your speech, you made a lot of references to Jewish people as well as certain people in your audience, not Jewish people in general, but certain people, especially in your audience, to Nazis. Now, that is extremely offensive when certain people are German, and they're also extremely offensive to people who've actually suffered under Nazi.
Okay, she's a little soy, to be fair, she is.
I don't respect that anymore. I really don't. I don't like and I don't respect the crocodile tears. The crocodile tears.
Now I'm curious what his speech was about, though. Now that I know he's fucking unhinged, I'm so curious what his comparisons were in his speech.
Allow me to finish, and allow me to finish. Listen, sir, allow me to finish. Sir, I don't like to play before an audience the Holocaust card. But since now I feel compelled to. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother, please shut up. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother was in my concentration camp. Every single member.
She's like losing her mind, bro. Chill. What are you doing?
My family, on my father's side, the Jews did not take arms against my late father was in Auschwitz concentration camp. My late mother was in my concentration camp. Every single member of my family on both sides was exterminated. Both of my parents were in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And it's precisely and exactly because of the lessons my parents taught me and my two siblings that I will not be silent when Israel commits its crimes against the Palestinians. And I consider nothing more despicable than to use their suffering and their martyrdom to try to justify the torture, the brutalization, the demolition of homes that Israel daily commits against the Palestinians. So I refuse any longer to be intimidated or browbeaten by the tears. If you had any heart in you, you would be crying for the Palestinians, not for what's inside.
Jesus.